Welcome back to Tech Tuesdays here on Northwest Digital News. Harry Brailsford, Kevin Hunter, and Kyle Torgerson here on the broadcast today, and we're going to share some book reviews with you. And I want to just share with people who, because reading has become a little bit of a lost art, Harry, unfortunately. And for people who are wondering how important reading actually is, it's one of those few things that you can do to not only improve IQ, but improve your overall smarts in terms of how your brain actually functions. And so when you think about that, if you want to be a nice, sharp, clear thinker, reading is one of the things that does it for you. And then I just want to share with you a couple of other major reasons why to read. Reading reduces stress, creates a lot more peace of mind for people, because when you're learning things, it has a significant impact there. Improves a person's analytical thinking. Your grammatical skills are much better with an improved vocabulary and improved memory skills. And then if you're somebody who writes or like to write for a living, your reading will also improve your writing. So a lot of reasons why to read. Let's start this off. Harry, we actually have a number of books here on the schedule. The first one that we wanted to chat about is a book titled Snowball Effect. And really kind of the essence of Snowball Effect is taking your customers. So it has to do with customer service. And it's, as it says in the subtitle, how to win more business and turn clients into raving fans. Kyle, if you would, pop that ladder of customer loyalty up on the back wall. And I want to share this with our viewing audience. If you look here, the bottom rung is simply a suspect. Somebody who could potentially do business with you, but hasn't done business with you. Then becomes the prospect. So a prospect is actually is drilling down, being more specific on who potentially could be your. So when you're thinking about marketing, a lot of people market to suspects when you should actually be marketing to prospects. So that's a much more defined segment within that market. And now we go to a shopper, and people will say a shopper is just somebody looking at what you've done. Actually, no, according to the ladder of loyalty here, a shopper is somebody who's done business with you one time. You don't actually get to call them a customer until they've been back. So that's a really interesting thing, because you'll hear in a lot of different businesses, people refer to their customers as like, no, that was just a shopper, somebody who stopped by, did business with you once and left. And so you actually have something cooking in your business when people come back and do business with you more than once. And so they now become a customer, and then you can move up the rungs there to somebody becoming a member who now feels part of your family. The next one up is an advocate who tells others about you, and then a raving fan. This is like a free sales force that will make your business grow by bounds the more people that you can add to this raving fan list. So that's really where you want to get as many clients to as possible. Not everybody will ever be a raving fan in any given situation, but at the minimum, you want to have as many people in that customer list, meaning people who've done business with you more than once. That's the thing that every business has to absolutely be working on, because Harry, that for most businesses, the number is somewhere between 70 and 80% of all people that did business with them only did business with them once.
Yeah, and that's expensive for all parties.
It's very expensive for all parties.
Nobody wins.
All right, let's move on to talking about anything from Andrew Bettany. I want to talk about this a little bit because we've got a number of books that we want to cover here, and we want to make sure we don't run out of time. So let's do that.
Yeah, no problem. So Andrew is a well-known technical author, and he was here in the Seattle area last week. Mm-hmm. Some context, and then a shout out to one of his books. Mm-hmm. The context is he holds the title Microsoft Most Valuable Professional, and last week in Redmond, I didn't have the chance to go to it, but a couple of thousand MVPs come in for their annual 5-day conference. Mm-hmm. And the MVP is an honorary, well, actually, why don't we call it an earned title, but it's an award. And sure. The way you become an MVP is you do something in the community. In this case, with Andrew, amongst the things he does, he writes books. And so we caught up with each other at the Seattle Tacoma Airport and chatted. And he is on fire. He's in his power band years. And so, for example, one that I think everybody could appreciate is the fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth one over, Windows virus and malware troubleshooting. Some of his books would be just a tad technical for the business to business market, but
Right.
everybody should be reading, as you started the program, and reading about things that affect them. And as you know, we have covered malware on this show in the context of security. So shout out to Windows virus and malware troubleshooting. He's from the United Kingdom, which also underscores, what a small world it is, right? That we're all interconnected, and we don't have a patent on good ideas. They can come from overseas too, my friend.
That's correct.
Yeah, Andrew Bettany. Yep, rock solid, folks. Look him up.
We have a guest, an author that we're going to have here on the show coming up sometime mid-April, so I'll jump over that one for now. Let's talk about crowdsourced.
Yeah, so what I did is I prepared for this show is I went to a Facebook group that I would encourage listeners to join, and it's called You Grew Up with Small Business Server If. So you grew up with Small Business Server If. About 800 of us that go back to the Microsoft SMB Small Business Server days. And this morning I posted up and I said, hey, fellas, I'm going to do a show on spring reads. Can you recommend some books? And very quickly, Andy Parks replied with a few titles. And that's fine. But Kevin and Kyle, what I really like about this is I really enjoy crowdsourcing my content, right? And seeing what people are reading, what they think is hot, what they think is not. And that's kind of how we got to this. Happy to rattle a couple off. Andy Parks is suggesting The Old New Thing by Raymond Chen is a pleasant trip down Windows memory lane. And I'm not talking RAM memory, but the memory, the wetware up here between our ears. He goes on to say, some of it was over his head, but it gives you interesting looks into how certain things work in Windows. But, more importantly, what I like about that is when you watch some popular shows like HBO Silicon Valley and some shows of the birth of the industry, these books are great because, I was there, Kevin, you were there, many of us were there, and it's just fun to read and revisit that. The next one is a very popular book. Satya Nadella's Hit Refresh is well known, and that is in fact a bestseller. It's been out for quite a while, but it's an interesting read because to connect the dots, Satya took over for Steve Ballmer when Steve Ballmer, his term as CEO came to an end.
Correct.
He took over, and Microsoft has taken a noticeable shift in what they do. There are a lot of articles, Kevin, maybe you've seen these, but they all amount to Microsoft got its groove back, and I would offer the stock market agrees.
Yes, most definitely.
With their valuation.
Most definitely.
So, yeah, it's good to see companies go through the tap of life, waves up and down. And then finally, Andrew was recommending another one called Showstopper, which I've actually read. I don't know if I could find it on the fly. I've actually read that book, and again, when it wouldn't be a far-fetched statement to say I was on the beaches of Normandy on World War II, the Great War. That's an analogy, of course. But what I'm talking about, the history of Windows NT in the 90s, and gentlemen, if you recall, but it was a real battle between Novell NetWare and Windows NT, right?
No doubt.
And there was no, I mean, I did both, and
Mm-hmm.
there was no guarantee Microsoft was going to pivot from MS-DOS and compete with Novell NetWare. They did. They competed and ultimately won. But it was, like I say, I like these books. I guess it's akin to, I remember my dad back in the day would, I'd find him awake at 1 a.m. watching the History Channel with old World War II movies. Now, he was in World War II, but there's something about us, Kevin, and maybe you can speak to the human psyche, but maybe it's with men, older people, I don't know, but there's something about the History Channel. There's something about reading a book about the Windows NT server history, because, I was there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, most definitely, and likewise, I was in that transition of moving away from that MS-DOS world to Windows NT, and it was for some people who actually hadn't been using technology at all in the workplace. See, because if you remember, like I'm recalling, even in some very large companies, it was like in the middle 80s that even computers started coming into the companies, and people would go, really, it was that late, or I should say even that recent, that there were still companies doing paper ledgers and things like that? And the answer is yes. So the transition that the computer world went through as far as technology is concerned was pretty interesting, and I can see why the older generation was so overwhelmed with it, because it was changing so rapidly.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever had the pleasure, just a quick war story and we'll move on, but in that era, but like people would quit their jobs at a company like a savings and loan I was at. I mean, one lady literally resigned when we were going to do a quote unquote migration. And
right.
Kevin, this was really disturbing to people. And she was in a position to resign. She was getting on a little bit in her years with the savings and loans, so she was in a position to do that. But it was just kind of funny because she basically said, "I just don't have another rodeo in me."
Yeah,
that's what it looked like.
Yep.
All right.
So let's talk about how to be an MSP.
Yeah. So this will be coming out in April, and maybe we should revisit it this springtime. I have updated a book. I had a book from 2003 called "How to Be an SMB Consultant," and lo and behold, that book was 15 years old when I opened it recently, right around Christmas. And I said, I need to update it because, Kevin, the book was citing examples that, quite frankly, are no longer relevant, like those wonderful and amazing gateway country stores that were gorgeous.
Right.
And I believe they went to several hundred locations around the U.S. And shortly thereafter, Gateway ceased to exist as we know it. They might have been ahead of their time on the store thing now that we have Apple and Microsoft stores. But clearly the book needed to be updated. And the business model has changed. And so, Kevin, back when I wrote the book, our industry was called break fix, and you bill $50 an hour, $100 an hour, the phone rings, and you're only dispatched when something goes wrong. And that's not necessarily rewarding.
Right.
Now, the industry and the broader business community has moved to as a service recurring billing. And the best example is your phone. The best example is T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon. Kevin, what do? They bill at the first of the month consistently, and often they are amortizing the value of your device, right? So, you know, instead of today paying $800 for a hotshot phone, what are they doing? They're getting you for $24 a month or something. But it's that recurring revenue business model, not just technology, that's wildly popular. And so I write that up, but I'll end on this. The book, 15 years later, is still the fundamentals of business, much like we started with your ladder and the snowball at the beginning of the conversation.
Correct.
The book is about finder, get the business, minder, manage the work, grinder, do the work. And Kevin, that hasn't changed, and I write that up. I mean, that's the point. Mm-hmm. That hasn't changed. The business models have changed a little bit, like recurring revenue billing. So I just wanted to today give a heads up to the audience. That book will be out in April. We'll talk about that another day.
Fantastic. Something I wanted to mention here for the benefit of our viewing audience is one of the things that you notice that Harry shared here on the show were actually 3 books referred by a colleague. And one of the things that, and Harry, this is great credit to you, because one of the things that every intelligent person I've ever known actually talks to the smart people around them and finds out what they're reading. You know what, you guys, you absolutely have to do this. If there's something that should always be part of your conversation with professional people around you, ask them what they're reading. And then, if I'm really thinking about potential other books to read, not only will I ask my colleagues what they're reading, but I'll ask them for their aha moments that they learned from the book. If they have none, well, then I'm like, all right, maybe I'll pass on that book. But if they share with you a few ahas that they pulled out of that book, you really ought to think about learning that. And you really ought to think about reading it, because not only may you also get the benefit of those lessons, but there may be additional things that you and your colleague then can chat about at a later date, and even more learning comes out of that. So great thing there. I wanted to make sure that we captured that, Harry, because this is one of the tactics that every smart person does. Talk to your friends and colleagues, find out what they're reading, and share some of those experiences. So,
well, and if you don't mind me adding real quick,
sure.
And I should have done this at the beginning, but here's another way to view reading. My sister's first husband was an editorial page editor for a newspaper, and he said, and so let's rewind the clock, but he said, where else can you get such value for 25 cents a day than a newspaper? It will entertain you for hours. And now newspapers are $1 today, but it's still a great value, cheaper than a cup of coffee. Great value, but I've always taken that forward with me. And then some time ago on 60 Minutes, Warren Buffett was being interviewed, arguably the smartest or most successful investor of all. Do you know he reads for 2 or 3 hours in the morning? What a luxury!
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is one of the traits of successful people. And it's funny is if you made a commitment to read even 15 or 20 minutes a day, I think you'll end up reading about 3 books a year, which is a heck of a lot more books than most people are reading. So recommend that you guys get out there and read, and some great recommendations here from Harry today. Thanks everybody who joined us here on the broadcast. We are out of time. Harry Brailsford, Kevin Hunter, and Kyle Torgerson, thanks for joining us here on Tech Tuesdays. We'll see you next week. Take care. This concludes today's live programming on Northwest Digital News. Thanks for joining us for this special broadcast. Heard around the world in more than 70 countries on YouTube, Instagram, Patreon, Facebook, and Twitch TV. If you enjoyed a story or guest we had here on Northwest Digital News and would like to strut your stuff on the broadcast, email us today at wainfo2017@gmail.com or call or text 360-545-3501. We're always interested in unique stories, topics, and guests to share with our worldwide audience. Before you go, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up and comment on the live stream. And for those of you who'd like to financially support the broadcast, you can do so at patreon.com/Northwest Digital News. We thank you for your patronage. On behalf of Chris Bornstead, Kyle Torgerson, Stephanie Hunter, and all the people that made this broadcast possible, I'm Kevin Hunter. Till next time, take care.